Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas.
I'm Heidi Henry, and today, Murray, we get to do one of my favorite episodes ever, I'm sure.
Heidi has been tweeting and Facebooking and basically publicly shaming me into doing an episode on Reagan, how he got there, and why his policies are the worst thing that's ever happened to our nation.
Oh, my gosh.
I completely agree. The way Heidi was saying it, it was like, oh, no, I was a Reagan fan. I was so young, and I was campaigning against him. So, no, definitely not a Reagan fan. But we are going to talk about the parallels we see today and how those policies have affected us through time.
Right.
And he was horrible.
You know, and Reagan is lauded and honored by the Republican Party as if he was a demigod. And the truth of the matter is that everything we have
had to fix.
Well, all the crises that we are dealing with today, crises in mental health, crises in homelessness and hunger, banking issues,
the international problems, particularly
student loans
in East Asian countries.
and in Central America, goes back to you, Ronald Reagan, and why you've always been my least favorite president.
So real briefly, when Jimmy Carter was in office, he had a lot of things going against him.
Yeah.
He had debt. He had
double-digit inflation.
Double-digit inflation. There was terrorism for the first time. It was combination. It wasn't that terrorism wasn't happening. It's that the media advanced to where they were able to do live things. That's what Vietnam brought us. So now people are so much more aware.
That brought us Nightline, remember?
Yes.
Capo?
Yeah. I totally remember that.
Yeah.
So that gave us so much more information. And so people are now, which would normally be terror attacks, people are now aware of it. It's coming to their homes.
Right.
Places being bombed. So there's this fear, there's this instability. He took office and he was amazing. He was smart. He was trying to dig us out. And he was trying to
hold our oppressors accountable. He was refusing to sell arms. He was refusing to deal with the
He spent a lot of time on foreign policy, trying to
navigate the Cold War, but hold Russia accountable.
Yeah, because this is before the wall fell.
Yes. So we don't know. Most of you, well, not most of you, but some of you don't remember the USSR and how terrifying Russia was and still is. And the fact that Carter had to navigate that with all the problems we had at home. And one of the things that he's famous for is the grain embargo, which started Farm Aid. But the reason we needed the grain embargo against Russia is not so much to starve Russian people, but to change the philosophies that governed Russia. Hungry people change things. And the problem with how Russia was doing things is they were acting as a terrorist nation. So that was why it wasn't Reagan that brought down the wall.
No.
It wasn't Reagan.
Wasn't.
It was Carter.
What's actually really interesting is Carter is also the one responsible for the hostages coming home.
Yes.
The way that it got negotiated with the incoming team, with Reagan's team, was they back-channeled Carter.
Right.
And had the hostages, because they sold them guns.
Right.
Had the hostages released after he took the oath. Mm-hmm. So it was a setup, which it had actually been all the negotiation and everything had been done under Carter.
Right.
It was already set to happen, and we don't remember that. And so there's this turmoil, there's this fear in society, there's tough economy, and you have a president who is one of the most intelligent and caring presidents we ever had.
With Carter.
But he didn't translate to the digital age of media very well at all.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have, in walks Ronald Reagan. Swagger, he's a cowboy, right?
No, he's not really a cowboy. He plays one on TV.
Well, that's...
in the movies.
And she's absolutely right.
He's an actor.
People remember, this all happened shortly after we thought aliens were invading on radio shows, and we created mass panic and hysteria. So this television in your house and more information and more news.
It only makes sense that we went and got
more media,
a movie star to be our president because he was camera ready.
he was camera ready. He was comfortable, but he also had a reputation. You can't. When I hear John Wayne, the first thing I think of is
Racism?
badass cowboy.
No. See, I think racism because he was a horrible racist.
Absolutely.
As was Reagan. Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. But most people conjure up the image of the characters that they've played.
Right.
Like I hear Kiefer Sutherland, I think Psycho, and then
See,
over
and
the last few years, I think like,
Roper because he ropes. He's a roper. He ropes cattle. He's a cow. He is a real cowboy.
But we're getting way off track.
I know.
The point is that he had the media going for him. He had a image, whether it was
Camera
real
ready.
or not.
Yeah.
The image with the American people was, even though they know he's not a real cowboy, it was this strength, this leadership, this take no shit. So it transferred into his campaign persona very well.
But that wasn't really who he was.
No.
That was what he played in the movies.
Exactly, but we were fooled.
Well, I wasn't.
No, I'm not saying you were,
Yeah.
but enough people were to vote him into office.
But Marie, that brings me to one of my favorite Reagan stories. The first argument I ever had with my parents was over Ronald Reagan about politics, because Reagan's whole platform was very it had a lot of swagger, but it didn't have a lot of substance, I didn't feel. So I argued with my parents, why should our tax dollars not be spent on our people? Why should it be spent on corporations? And they would argue back with me. So it was my first presidential election, to vote in.
The one that I really got involved in politics was the Carter-Reagan race.
Oh, okay.
My parents were always very political. They were Democratic. They were strong. And I mean, I was young, but that's what struck me was getting that new information, being able to understand and digest what was going on and saying, this is not right. Like, this is bad.
Yeah.
I remember arguing with a fourth grade teacher out in Wallace, Boots was eighth grade, and the principal, Dave Herman, about why Ronald Reagan was a really bad choice.
Yeah.
And this is a pre-teenage.
Well, like I said, with my parents, we had
And my parents were 100% anti-Reagan because my mom's family are farmers, and my dad's a union guy.
Yeah.
And they knew from the beginning that Reagan was going to be offshoring, that they were going to lose jobs, that he didn't like the unions.
No.
So that was the first.
He never met a
push for
union
me.
that he
And
would
then-
support.
No, and then as we got further into finding out more about him, I was like, this is nuts.
But yet he swept into victory twice,
Why?
and Nancy thought he should get a third term, even though he was
Had Alzheimer's.
Had Alzheimer's. So who was running the country then?
You want to know?
It was W, or not W, HW.
Cheney.
Huh?
Cheney.
No, it was HW. HW was
Right, the vice president,
Right.
but who really was controlling things.
Yeah.
It wasn't HW. He wasn't actually controlling.
see, I
He wasn't pulling the strings.
Okay, so that's another episode.
So anyway, let's go back to Ronald Reagan. So the country is in turmoil and afraid. You have this strong image projected by years of playing these strong roles. He sweeps into office, and what does he do? One
We
of the
elect
first
a
things-
grossly unqualified person.
One of the first things that just absolutely was horrific was that hit me and you as well, was the rescinding of the go ahead.
Okay, so it was called the Mental Health Systems Act, which Carter signed in 1980. And the thing with that is it gave the ability to give mental health care within the communities. We knew that institutionalizing people was not going very well and that we needed to revamp the system. So what Carter had got signed into law was the ability to have mental health clinics right in your community. So if somebody was suffering from any type of mental affliction, they could get help locally and easily have wonderful access within the community. And one of the first things Reagan did was not only did he repeal most of that, but he also closed most of the institutions.
So all of these people who were being medicated, treated, helping get a
Therapy.
foothold back into society were relinquished onto the streets.
Right.
Unless they were a criminal. And so you even had criminals released onto the streets. the jump in homelessness, the jump in crime was
exponential.
It was because
We
of
never had
what
a homelessness
he did.
problem before, except for what they used to call Skid Row, which was people that had serious addiction issues, usually to alcohol. And what that did was it gave Skid Row an influx of mentally ill people. So now you have people that are homeless because of mental illness and because of addiction.
You know, I wonder if you think about it, what would have happened if we hadn't have done that? We would have the resources that are out there, the nonprofit agencies, all the people in the community that have to come together to try to help these people from a problem the government caused. Right. All of their resources would be devoted to another issue.
Right.
And the cost overall would be no emergency room visits. You know,
we still haven't fixed this crisis.
No,
Marie.
And this is 1980, which is I'm really
81.
I don't math well. 30.
Today's 1990. 2019.
Shit, almost 40 years.
No.
Oh, see, I don't. No one saw this. You can't prove anything. Go ahead. Oh my God! Quickly save me! I can't believe I just did that.
Well, here's the problem, Marie, is that we still have a mental health crisis in this nation because of Ronald Reagan, and some have equated
and the stigmatization that came with it.
Oh my
as well.
gosh, the stigmatization of people who had AIDS, who had were on welfare, who were poor, who were mentally ill by the Reagan administration still plagues our society today.
That's the adaptation of the GOP.
Mm-hmm. You know, and here's the other thing is that the increase in school shootings, because we don't have mental health care, is so it's so malleable. You can feel it. You can feel the lack of care that we have put out there. The total abandonment of people for mental health with mental health issues, and the fact that insurance doesn't cover it very well. Medicaid, it's almost non-existent, and no one. I mean, I have calls still from people from when I ran before, even though I didn't prevail, that ask me, how do I help my child with their mental illness, because there's no place for them to go. There's not enough care, especially if they're a Medicaid patient. And thank you, Ronald Reagan, for effing that up for our whole country.
So that led to crises that we're still trying to fix and deal with today, which includes more stress on our criminal justice systems, more stress on our health systems, more stress on our societal systems. So the impacts we're still feeling and we haven't fixed. The next step on our journey of why Ronald Reagan was the worst president ever, and why we're still digging ourselves out is...
Well, let's talk about why we have a student loan crisis, Marie, because Ronald Reagan, and this directly impacted me after...
Ronald Reagan had nothing to do with student loan crisis.
Here's what happened. I'll give you the analogy of what happened with me. I graduated in 1978, so back when the earth was still cooling, and community college was very affordable, except for me. I was a young person at 17. I had to leave home. So I was out on my own at 17, trying to support myself and trying to put myself through school while working. And it didn't go very well. And at one point I made the decision to drop out of school and learn to be a horse trainer because it was free. Okay. So that's what I did. The problem with that is when I came back from that and decided that I should return to school and finish my business degree, is that the funding model had changed thanks to Reagan. So now, if your family made $35,000 a year, no matter how many people were in your family, you no longer qualified for a lot of the federal assisted loans, federally guaranteed loans, and he also tied your ability to borrow money or to have money through grants to if you were living at home and how much your parents made. Now, the problem with that is, even though I was emancipated because I was living on my own, my parents made a tremendous amount of money and really were very supportive of. They were very, as much as I love them, they were very self-absorbed. So they weren't going to sign anything for me to get a loan. They weren't going to sign anything for me, period. And there was no way to be fully emancipated. So I didn't end up going back to school. And the people I went to school with were all in the same boat. I think about all of my classmates.
Which brings us to a major issue we're facing right now, and that is the baby boomers and the generation behind the baby boomers.
Yeah.
Are all still in student loan debt.
Well, this is thanks to Reagan.
Yes, it is. So you can thank if you went back to school to get a degree, or you got your hosed early on. Guess what? Thank you, Reagan. It's your fault.
Guess what he used to call? This is what Reagan used to call people who needed to borrow money to go to school. Tax eaters. They were eating your tax dollars. Now, instead of investing in people, Reagan decided that those were the same as a welfare queen. And you have to remember, too, Reagan made up the welfare queen. They never existed. There was no... And
bootstraps ideology.
Well, and this is what he called it. He specifically named a black woman, so he was using his prejudicial, racial, divisive language with 9 children by 8 different fathers, driving a Cadillac and making $150K off the tax rolls a year. Never existed. Never happened.
So
not once.
Incredibly racist and tapping into the racism and hatred that
and we're still dealing with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are still condemning people who are poor and single mothers because of Ronald Reagan. And that is
or people who just need help. Yeah. People who need a bridge to get from point A to point B.
Shouldn't our tax dollars go to help people get up out of poverty?
Absolutely.
And onto a better platform so that they can rise from.
And shouldn't all of us pay an equal percentage of what we have, not 1% for great disparity?
Well, here is Reaganomics.
Okay, so Reaganomics I talk about frequently in life because it is the largest scam ever perpetrated on the American. Well,
somehow,
whoa, back that up,
girl. Backing up the train.
Largest scam, Donald Trump election presidency is the biggest scam.
The parallels between these two are just
remarkable.
Well,
we'll talk about that at the very end. So Ronald Reagan had an economist that had this
Laffer curve
that had this theory that if you enrich the rich, they will spend more into the economy.
Trickle down economics doesn't work.
Of course, those that they pay will pay more, and everyone makes happy land. He's since come out and said, it was a crock of shit.
It was.
And it didn't work, but it worked for those 1%. So income disparity, wealth inequality, guess what? Thanks, Reagan.
It boomed, and that's how we're in the position we're in. So Reagan took the top tax rate down from, hang on, I've got my figures written down because I wanted to make sure I got these right, from 70% on the top income earners down to 28%, and we know T-Rump dropped it again. And then he took the tax rate on corporations. Not only did he allow them to offshore so that they didn't have to pay any taxes.
And he was a big union buster. He hated the unions, which is personal to me.
So let me finish this. He took the corporate tax rate from 48% to 34%. The problem with that is when the wealthy aren't paying their taxes and the corporations aren't paying the taxes.
Who's paying for everything?
The middle class. The taxes and fees.
The ones that can't afford to find ways to get out of paying taxes.
The tax burden on us went way up, and the problem with that is that it created a new class of people called working poor. And we'd never really, we'd had poor people before and we'd had working people before. Now it's the largest growing demographic in the country. So, we have that to thank you for, Ronald Reagan.
Oh, we have crisis in the Middle East to thank you for Ronald Reagan. Because
Ronald Reagan.
Hey, Tulsi. Hi, shout out again to Tulsi. We want to say endless regime wars. Where did they start?
With Ronald Reagan.
Well, actually, after World War II, trying to suppress the communist growth, but pretty much freaking the regime change we see today in South America, in Central America, in Eastern Europe. Guess what they came from?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan never met an arms deal he didn't like. He didn't love. He would arm countries who were fighting each other. He would arm both countries to get that arms deal done. And when he couldn't do that legitimately, he would launder the money. And that's how he got the Iran-Contra scandal, which nearly and should have caused him to be impeached?
Huh. Do we know any other presidents who have
Loves
been
despots?
against any social program,
Yeah.
for any billionaire and corporation,
Yeah.
who
Hates
cares
unions.
only hates unions, is
Hates the poor.
racist, homophobic, and if you look at the policies he's trying to put forth, they are
He's trying to-
Reaganomics. It's like
Reagan 2.0.
so I'm putting pieces together, trying to figure out who was involved in the Reagan era behind the scenes, who was the real string puller. Because Reagan may have been smart, but he was an actor. He wasn't all that smart. Someone was pulling the
smart.
strings. And is that person still the same as this
I see, and I
person?
think it was
Or was
HW.
there a resurgence? No.
Well, no, but William Barr.
HW, no, I don't
William Barr had a lot to do with him not being impeached, and that was some of the legalese
So
that
the
he gave them.
GOP's dream, their wet dream,
Is to make us a
is
feudal,
Reaganomics.
Feudal society. So there's the
Is
wealthy and
is
the
to
rest of
revert
us.
to Reaganism.
Yeah,
yeah, and that's what.
So,
his
and let's
presidency
talk a
is.
little bit about what he did to the unions. He was having a lot of problems with the UAW and the steel workers and the air traffic controllers. So what he did to those first two unions is he decided to change the regulations for imports and exports and allowed those jobs to go overseas, and that allowed car manufacturing and steel production to go overseas, which about tanked our unions. And then when the air traffic controllers went on strike, instead of supporting them and helping them work through the strike, he fired them all. And tanked their
And
union.
because of him, federal employees lost the right to strike.
Right. They
can't
lost the right to
They
strike.
can't.
And how unfair is that? Because what leverage do you have when you
have
don't
none.
have collective bargaining? And that was one of Reagan's dreams of that is fulfilled every single day. And that's my biggest problem with Ronald Reagan. He is the USA despot that just keeps giving and giving and giving and giving ideas to our current president. And when
We're still trying to fix the things that he set in motion that far ago. So let's look at today's day and age, right? We had Barack Obama, very ethical presidency, no scandals, no questions.
like Carter.
Like Carter, he may not have been the most popular with some of the more progressives, or, but he still accomplished a lot.
He was
pulled us
half
out
black.
of the recession.
Oh my God, he was half black.
We all know really the reason why. It's because of
Right.
his skin color.
Right.
Racism is at the bottom of so much of this, whether it's religious racism or gender discrimination or gender biases or whatever
Oppression
it is.
of the poor, oppression of the mentally ill. All of these things are Republican ideologies that were able to be brought forth through Reagan because Reagan was not smart enough to really protect the people. He ran on a script platform, and the script has been reintroduced under Trump in an even more punitive way, so that not only are these things still the struggle is the same, but now we're being punished for any forward momentum that we've had. The forward momentum and the LGBTQ community and economics, etc., that were achieved through Carter and then through Obama, rolled back under Trump because Trump has got some kind of weird fascist ideology that's so closely aligned with Reagan. And neither one, he's not a smart man either. That's the problem.
And there's string pulling that's happening, of
Yes.
course.
Well,
Agendas. Trump was never interested in politics. He's not that smart. He had a lot of money and name recognition. He didn't, he had an ego. Someone put him up to it. Someone pushed the issue.
Could it be
It
Pootie?
wasn't him. No, I'm saying within the
Oh, yeah.
Republican Party, within the
McConnell.
established.
It's clearly McConnell.
But someone who had that connection.
Yeah.
And so we're struggling with all these things that he did. And when we think about, we were in this place where I guess we wanted a change. I don't know why. Things seemed like they were going pretty good.
We wanted a white guy.
Hillary had been so demonized for so long that people would protest vote for against Hillary. So there were so many other factors.
She had the audacity to be female.
Man, no kidding. She had a vagina. But the point is the society, I guess, was ready for that resurgence of the
Patriarchy,
xenophobia, racism,
misogyny,
return to American values, which we don't know what
those really aren't American values.
Pull out of our allies, let terrorists run free, put children in cages. I don't know.
Sell arms to despots.
Yeah.
Send our troops to despots. Because, and here's the one thing I heard today, it's because the Saudis are paying for our troops. We're not mercenaries.
That's exactly it. They are, and that we cannot do that. The privatization, money making, people talk about, one of my biggest frustrations is we want somebody to run the government like a business. You cannot do that. The two are diametrically opposed. Government is about service
to the people,
assistance, legislation, keeping society together. That's government.
Right.
There should be no capitalism in government. It's a completely separate entity.
Government's not supposed to have anything to sell.
Profit and money.
Yeah.
And that's
not
those
government.
two don't belong together because money and power corrupt.
Absolutely.
And so that it's a horrible merger. Anytime someone goes, I want a businessman, go to hell. Why do you want a businessman? He's the I run a business.
I run a business too, and here's the thing. That with our current president, we're going to talk about this on another episode called the Emoluments Clause and you. But when you have somebody who's in business and they come into office, usually they take a step back from their personal business so that they don't, that there's no hint of corruption for a federal employee in their business, right? So Reagan didn't have that, but he also didn't have good judgment. He was a great actor, and or I shouldn't say great, but he was a good actor, and that's why he gets so much credit for that swagger, for being able to read from the script. But the bottom line is that this country, since Reagan took office in '81, has really had a difficult time.
We have struggled. We are still fighting some of the same issues.
Yes.
And those and we're feeling the effects of the judicial appointments that were made back in that as well.
Yeah.
We're
still feeling the effect of Reagan judicial appointments.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Reagan judicial appointments.
So
it's just one of those things that when you're thinking about a president, you may have your specific issue that you're really passionate about, but to me, it's more important to have someone who will not take this country farther damaged into the future.
Murray, when we were first talking about doing this episode, and I really kind of pushed it because I got a thing at church on Sunday about how we have 22 children, homeless children in Ottawa in the PAD system. Now, I helped start PADs in my county in 1990. We didn't have any children. We had men. We rarely had a woman come in, very rarely.
Mm-hmm. The largest percentage of the homeless population are families.
And the problem with that is that is part of Reagan's legacy. We wouldn't have homelessness and hunger and a mental health crisis and a student loan crisis and an identity crisis as a nation if it wasn't for Ronald Reagan. We have to be able to take a hard look at who he was in reality and own every mistake that he's made and undo
learn from those mistakes.
Yeah, we have to undo a lot of the economic policy.
Try to fix and foreign policy.
Oh my gosh.
Every area of our life has been permeated by the policies that were made by a self-centered capitalist.
We are
repeating those same mistakes.
Our soldiers are still being blown up with the guns that Reagan sold to our enemies because he could. He never met an arms deal he didn't love. And we are dealing with our border crisis largely because of Ronald Reagan and the instability he caused in Nicaragua. And we owe it to the world to be better than Ronald Reagan.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Murray Briel.
Heidi Henry.
And we would like to say please subscribe, like, forward, share.
Follow.
Yes, Heartland Mamas.
Donate.
MAMAS. Find us anywhere. Just type us into Google. We're everywhere.
We pop up.
So thank
again. You so much for listening to my rant on Ronald Reagan.
I agree.
Bye-bye.